Hiya, folks. It stopped raining, but it looks like it might start raining again, so if I seem to be hurrying, that's why. My niece, who is now in her 20s, started asking me about ordaining as a Buddhist monk. So I thought I would do a little bit of a talk about that and see what I could say about it. She specifically asked me if she'd have to shave her head, and so let's use that as our jumping off point in that. The answer is maybe, maybe not. Depends on who you ordain with. And this is kind of going to be the theme of the talk, I think. It's different in different places. So, generally, if you are ordaining in the West, you can probably find somebody who won't require you to shave your head, woman or man, but some orders of Buddhism do require it. When I was ordained, let's go to that bit. I was ordained by Gudo Wafu Nishijima, and Gudo Nishijima's version of ordaining a person is very old school. He goes by what is written in Shobogenzo by Dogen and nothing else. That's his attitude. Is Dogen set the standard for how you're supposed to ordain in this tradition, and anything else that came after Dogen's time, he doesn't care. He just did not care about it. So in my case, he didn't make me shave my head to be ordained. He said it just didn't matter. Now, that part is probably him breaking a little bit with Dogen, but he also broke a little bit with Dogen in that regard, and maybe that's why he was kind of lenient with it, because when he ordained, he was working for the Japanese Ministry of Finance, and it was at a time before shaven heads were common. You know, these days lots of people have their heads shaved, but in those days, I think this was in the 1960s, maybe it was even later, I don't know. But anyway, it was a time before it was common for men to just shave their heads for fashion reasons or whatever. So he would have looked really weird with a shaven head. And his teacher let him wear a rubber bald head wig, one of those cheap, dime store rubber bald head wigs, to get his picture taken, because the Soto Shu requires you to shave your head. So, the Soto Shu, what are they? The Soto Shu are, this is my version of it, so other people would maybe not like this version of it, but to me they're like the Roman Catholic Church. They're a big, giant organization. I think they're modeled on the Roman Catholic Church. In the Meiji Restoration era, at the end of the 19th century, the Japanese decided to kind of make all of their various institutions align with institutions they found in Europe and America, and the Soto Shu, as far as I can tell, just by looking at them, seems to have modeled itself on the Catholic Church. So they're a big organization, and they set certain rules and things, and their version of ordaining it has a lot of stuff added to it since Dogen's time. But one of the things they require is you have your head shaved. So I ordained with Nishijima Roshi, and then I got Dharma transmission from Nishijima Roshi. Those are the only two ceremonies he does, as far as any sort of ordination type things. There are, if you go to the official Soto Shu route, there are a bunch of other steps, like a half a dozen other steps to do. Nishijima didn't do any of those. So I ordained with him as a priest, and then or a monk, or whatever, he called it monk. And then I did this Dharma transmission ceremony. And this thing of priest-monk, see, I'm scattershot here, I apologize. But there's a word bozu in Japanese, which could be translated as priest, could be translated as monk. So the differentiation between what's a priest and what's a monk, as far as what happens in Japan, it doesn't exist. In the United States, Zen groups often, I know the San Francisco Zen Center makes a designation between what is a priest and what is a monk, but that's not traditional back in Japan. So I did that, and then I found out I was going to be moving back to the United States, and there was a chance I'd want to teach in the United States, and it occurred to me that I ought to sort of legitimatize myself by becoming officially part of Soto Shu and doing an ordination through them. And I talked to Nishijima Roshi, and we organized it, and I did the ordination. And for that ordination, I had to shave my head because they require it. However, even though they require you to shave your head at the time that you're ordained, nobody's checking up on you to see if you grow your hair back. However, as I said, there's other steps. There's a novice ordination, and then there's a thing called Hosen Shiki, which is called Dharma combat. If you get Dharma transmission, there's a Shiho ceremony. So for every one of those ceremonies, the Soto Shu requires you to have a shaved head at that ceremony. So if you went through their steps, you would have to shave your head at least at those ceremonial times. Now, like I said, it sort of depends on who you go to, whether you do that or not. Like I said, Nishijima Roshi did not require it for an ordination through him. This is another kind of sticky subject. When I went to Poland a few years ago, apparently, during my visit, I didn't know about this, but the Polish Buddhist internet erupted with all this consternation over the idea that I was not really what I claimed to be, that I was not really an ordained monk or really a Dharma transmitted monk. And this is because I think somebody read my first book and the description of it didn't fit their description of what they thought it meant. And let me see if I can give you a metaphor that might explain what was happening there. A lot of people in the West, sorry about the trash trucks, a lot of people in the West have this idea of Buddhism as a giant monolith, or even Zen as a giant monolith that's just one thing. And they learn what the tradition is in the version that they learned it from, and then they think that applies to everybody. So these guys saying that my ordination was not legitimate because it didn't match the version that they'd heard from somebody from a different tradition is sort of like saying, well, that guy can't be a legitimate Baptist minister because he didn't go to the Catholic seminary. You know, it's apples and oranges. You're not comparing the same things. So there's a wide variety of different ways of doing things within Buddhism, and even within Zen Buddhism, and even within Soto Zen Buddhism. And generally speaking, this isn't always the case, but generally speaking, one Buddhist organization will sort of look at another Buddhist organization and say, well, you're legitimate as far as the way they do it, even though we don't do it that way here. So I tend to be accepted by, people like the San Francisco Zen Center and stuff like that to go speak at their places because I did the ordination, but I didn't do the ordination the way they do it at the San Francisco Zen Center. Now, there's a whole other layer to this. Like, when I did the Dharma transmission ceremony through Nishijima Roshi, and then I did that ceremony through the Soto organization, that ordination through the Soto organization made me like the lowest level novice monk, that they have, because it was just the first ordination of their many tiered version. And so there was a woman named Taijun who was a Buddhist nun who had done the whole deal through the Soto Shu, and she was also a student of Nishijima Roshi, but she also made herself legitimate in quotes, through the Soto Shu. So I asked her, well, what do I need to do? And she said, well, there's no problem in doing it. You can do it. It's not that you won't be accepted or anything, but you have to do this and this and this. You have to do the Hosen Shiki, and then you have to do the Ten-A, and then you have to do the Zuisei, and these are all different ceremonies, but let me see if I can explain them to you the way she explained them to me. The Hosen Shiki is called Dharma combat. And I'm like, oh, Dharma combat, so I have to, prove my knowledge of the Dharma? And she said, no. It's all rehearsed, and you just memorize a script, and you follow the script, and then, they say what they're supposed to say in their script, and you say what you're supposed to say in your script. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. And it's people I don't know. Yeah, it's people you don't know. It's higher-ups in the organization, and they do this little song and dance. And by the way, you have to buy a whole bunch of special clothes, and you have to pay these people for their part in the ceremony. And she told me it would end up costing me, I think, around $2,000 to do all this, and plus the travel that I would have to do to go to the place and all this stuff. And I thought, Well, this isn't why I got into this practice. I didn't get into this practice to be legitimized by some organization, some sort of Catholic Church sort of organization of people who I don't know. An organization that my teacher actually called a guild of funeral directors, because that's really all they seem to care about these days, is running funerals and making their money that way. So I didn't want to join the Guild of Funeral Directors, especially if I was going to have to pay a lot of money to do it. I was making good money at Subaraya Productions. I could have afforded it. Everybody would have been okay with it. But I just decided I don't want to do it. Sorry about the beeping. I have to talk through it if I want to get this video done before it rains. So another question becomes, at least for me, is it worth it to ordain? And if I'm answering, I don't know if my niece is watching these videos or not, but if I was answering to her, I would say probably in her case, no. There's no point in ordaining. I think what she imagines is what I often imagined when I was her age and thinking about this, that you could ordain as a monk and then they would let you live in the monastery and then you'd be kind of away from all the BS and crap of the world, and you'd be in this sheltered environment and everything would be great because everybody's cool there. That doesn't exist. It's just not there. The monastic life can be just as weird and full of human drama and BS as anywhere else. I've watched a lot of it happen from afar. I've never actually lived in a monastery, but I've heard from people who lived in them what happens there, and I wouldn't recommend it. The other thing is, it doesn't really help. You can do practice without ordaining. There's no real reason. The one thing, though, that you might consider if you're my niece or somebody like my niece is doing a ceremony called jukai. And jukai is sometimes referred to as lay ordination, but it's not really ordination. But it's basically the same ceremony that monks take when they ordain, which is that you vow to uphold the Buddhist precepts for the rest of your life. And that can be a good thing to do. I wrote a bunch about this in, I believe, Hardcore Zen, one of my books. I don't remember, maybe somebody out there remembers which book I wrote this in, but I wrote a whole thing about how taking a public vow can actually really help you or whoever you are to kind of stay the course even in difficult times, to kind of stick with something even when it's difficult because you have gone public and said you're going to do it. Christ almighty, that beeping is loud. Okay, well, at least the truck moved a little farther away, and I can go back to what I was saying, which I can barely remember now. The thing is, I guess ordaining is interesting. I will leave a link to an article written by Muho, who was the former abbot of Antaiji, which is the monastery that was started for the sake of Kodo Sawaki Roshi, who was my teacher's teacher. And he wrote a good article about how to ordain as a monk through the Soto Shu and whether it's worth it. And by the way, I'm using the word monk kind of interchangeably. There's a word niso for a female monk, but a lot of people just translate it as monk. Some people translate it as nun, but anyway, that's why I've been saying monk this whole time, but male or female. It's basically this situation, as far as ordaining is concerned, is the same. There are differences, but they're mostly the same. So that's it. It started raining already, so I'm going to go back in and edit this video. And if you've got questions about ordination, please leave them in the comments, and I'll see, because I may have raced through this so fast that I didn't get to what I wanted to say. Anyway, if you want to donate to me being able to say more things about ordination, you can send money to this URL that you're seeing on the screen right there. That is my onlyest way of making a living. That's all the income I get, but I am good at getting enough income because a lot of you keep donating. So if you are in financial trouble and having difficulty, don't feel guilt-ridden in order to donate. I'm doing okay, but I'm doing okay because people do donate, so thank you for donating. We will see you later. Have a good time all the time. Bye.